My wife and I were talking this morning before I started the show, and she said, "No, Randall, make sure you tie this all together. Make sure people grasp what it is you're trying to say. 'Cause I'm trying to give you a pretty big plate full of spiritual thought, intellectual and philosophical thought, and I want to do a good job, so stay with me. When you look at the perspective, the distance, the time of what happened from the first slaves being brought to America to the start of the Civil War, you had so many different things going on. For example, in the North, the abolitionist movement took off in earnest in the 1820s and 1830s. And at the beginning, there was anti-slavery societies that existed throughout the country, even in the South. But in the South, it was more of an educational thing, and it was, gradually over time, maybe we can send the slaves to Haiti, maybe we can send them back to Africa, maybe the federal government will reimburse slave owners for their slave. There was no urgency. There was no sense of, this is a crime against God, and we are going to pay a horrific price for the sin of man-stealing, of kidnapping men, women, and children, and then forcing them to be our slaves. That was absent. Then along came what became known as the abolitionists, all right? The abolitionists came forward, and they began to denounce slavery in the fiercest of terms. They began to say that the Constitution was a covenant with hell. William Lloyd Garrison, probably the most famous leader of the abolitionist movement, called for the immediate, unconditional release of all slaves. Well, at that point, it became, slowly but surely, a focal point of political powers in the South and the North to silence this opposition. Did you know that before the start of the Civil War, it was against the law to send or to distribute anti-slavery literature in the slave-holding states? It was a crime to spread anti-slavery literature in the South. Did you hear of the Fugitive Slave Act, which was passed not just with Southern votes, but Northern votes, which made it a federal crime to help a slave gain freedom in Canada? The Underground Railroad is a very famous part of abolitionist history, where slaves were taken secretly through or from slavery in the South through the northern states and then to freedom in Canada. Thousands of slaves ultimately got their freedom that way. Well, the slaveholders and their counterparts in the North, like John Boehner today, okay, like Mitch McConnell today. And yes, in case you're wondering, I'm trying to make the connection, and without equivocation and without apology, that John Boehner and Mitch McConnell are like the northern politicians who cut deals with the devil in the South, which helped lead toward the Civil War. So the northern puppets, the northern, we want to get along, the northern, this is just business, the northern, well, we want to uphold the law, politicians helped pass the Fugitive Slave Act, which made it a federal crime for people in the North, or anywhere for that matter, to help a fugitive slave escape. You had, in the 1930s, a young black man from Massachusetts release a book called An Appeal. It became known as David Walker's Appeal. In the appeal, nearly 30 years before the outbreak of the Civil War, he prophesied the Civil War. Literally spoke of God stirring up sons and brothers and fathers and sons to fight against each other as a recompense for the blood that was shed, for the lives that were stolen, for the evil of that bondage. He prophesied. And at the time, all this was going on, there were bounties put out on the head of David Walker, of William Lloyd Garrison. At one point, there was a contingent of people that had a warrant for David Walker or for William Lloyd Garrison's arrest, and he actually fled to Europe for a season. There was a bounty on his head, $5,000 dead or alive. That would be like $500,000 today. Okay, just so you grasp the significance of the danger that it was, or that it entailed to speak and to fight against the evil of slavery, and the fact that Northern politicians like John Boehner and Mitch McConnell today helped the Southern butchers and merchants of slavery. So think of that time, that distance, and then think of what happened. And that's what I want to talk about when we come back, preparation. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today.